Hold it! Stay right there. What are you waiting for? Kill them! Kill them both! Now, wait a minute. Is it money you're after? I'll give you as much as you want.
May the saints forgive you, because I won't.
Hey, you're listening to another episode of Threshold Saints. This is Jin The Ninja, and enjoy the show.
Okay, so Biccy,
Yes.
tell me a little bit about your vampire posting aesthetic and everything. Goth Boys, Vampire Kitty, everything. Just give a little background and like what your posting ethos is.
Yeah, so I've not been on Twitter for that long. I joined during like the COVID stuff. With a different account. I've only had the Biccy account for maybe a year or something. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of just Biccy is sort of like an avatar, I guess, of myself that I created. I sort of envision him as like a little vampire boy, and yeah, I don't know. I just try and keep things quite light and cozy on Twitter. When I first joined, I was kind of like heavily into like politics posting and stuff, and I think like over the past year or so, I've just been trying to like keep it light and cozy and comfy. So yeah,
I think you do a great job with that. I love your aesthetic. I love the vampire cozy. I think that's a great way to describe you. I love Vampire Kitty, obviously. And you do have a lot of like nods to nerd culture, nods to like gaming culture. I know you've been Tomb Raider posting a lot, and I think that's probably what we'll talk about. But so do you have any like, and just in terms of like giving people a background, I'm sure people are familiar with you who will listen to this because it'll be like that, the same kind of like crowd, I guess, that we all are mutuals with. But in terms of like, that's how I am too. Like politics posting has become very secondary or maybe tertiary to being on Twitter. I kind of keep it to like the esoterica stuff, to work that I'm doing. I'm not really, politics is just, it's kind of over.
definitely.
So, I totally feel you on that. Biccy, do you want to like, how would you characterize your relationship with gaming, or specifically with Tomb Raider? Or is it more of like a relationship with the films, or just like because it's a British property, is that what draws you to it? Just give like a little background into what makes it interesting for you, that specific title or gaming in general.
So like gaming in general, I think I've kind of been interested in since I was a kid. So I grew up in the 90s. And like my dad is from like a computer background. He always worked in computers. So we were one of like the first kind of families, I guess, in my school that had a computer at home. So this is like sort of, I don't know, like mid 90s, like 95. It wasn't that common for people to have a computer. And I guess like Tomb Raider was one of the first games that I sort of really kind of like fell in love with, but was also kind of afraid of at the same time. I remember it must have been like 96 when the first game came out. My dad got a copy of the demo for the PC from some guy at work, and he like booted it up, and it was the second level where you enter into like this cave, and there's all of these like wolves that start attacking you pretty much immediately from the get-go. And that was kind of like my first like introduction to Tomb Raider, and I was just like, oh my god, this is the most terrifying thing. And it took me like probably till I was a little bit older to be able to actually like play through it. I would sort of boot it up just to kind of like look at it for a little bit, and then I was always sort of too scared to try and progress. But yeah, I don't really know what it is in particular about Tomb Raider that kind of grabbed me when I was a kid, but like so it's been with me really throughout like my entire adult life. I've kind of like followed the franchise's like ups and downs, and yeah, I don't know, it's it just means a lot to me. And I know there's kind of, I don't know, you, there's kind of this thing I think with homosexuals where they kind of like develop an obsession for like one woman and they sort of become obsessed with her, and like for a lot of gays it's like Madonna or something. For me, like that was always Lara Croft. Like she was my sort of obsession girl, and she's not real, but she feels very
I
real to me.
actually, well, I think it's cooler that she's not real. I think it's cooler that she is kind of meta. She exists in like an alternate universe, kind of. I don't know. I think that's awesome. But I
Yeah,
have
go on.
no. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I remember being a kid and being in school, and there was like me and maybe like two other boys in my class who all really liked Tomb Raider, and like we kind of thought that she was real. It was almost like a rumor that we had between ourselves, where like we were all kind of secretly convinced that she was a real person. And I think the marketing around it at the time really kind of pushed that narrative. Like there would be like interviews with her in magazines and like photo spreads of her in like fashion magazines and stuff. And it was almost like she was like this new celebrity. Like I definitely sort of link her with that whole like cool Britannia thing of like Cape Moss and like Oasis and all of that stuff. Um, she kind of like feels like a part of that to me, which is cool.
I think that's an amazing observation. I totally agree with you. I was just gonna say before that I remember the wolves or the wolves, excuse me, in the cave, and yeah, I was exactly the same. Could not pass it. Would honestly just hang out in the mansion all the time. Like I would go
Yeah,
swim in the mansion, run around the mansion, but I never really would play through until much later.
yeah.
So, but yeah,
I think that was one of the things that I think was so nice about it, that you always had the safety of like being able to just like run around a house and play around with the controls and stuff. It's kind of, I don't know, you're kind of preparing yourself for like taking on the adventure, even if you never really get around to it, which is cool. You don't really get
no,
that kind of in games anymore.
no, you don't, and especially because the Imagine served not just as like the base of kind of like safety, but also it was where you could practice swimming, practice doing the jumping in the gym, doing the crazy, because it was a very difficult game. I know kids probably won't remember or recognize like how difficult it was, and the controls weren't clunky, but it definitely it took some finesse, some skill to do some of the running jumps, some of the more difficult platform jumps. So it was definitely like they were giving you, and they definitely built her out her character. They definitely treated her like she was some like down at heels aristo, and then she sort of like recovered her fame and fortune through treasure hunting. I mean, that they definitely sold it as that, like almost like meta real, like real beyond real almost, and definitely part of the cool Britannia wave. And I remember that too, like seeing like the Sega Saturn magazine, the PS magazine would have like swimsuit kind of like pullouts of her, and playing volleyball with like the other girls from like Virtua Fighter girls or whomever. I mean, very interesting marketing style and very interesting character. I think like definitely not, because we had you had the other treasure hunting games come after, like the I forgot what it's called, but the guy with the Drake guy, and he's like very rough and tumble. He's very American. He's very like he's a scoundrel, and she is kind of not a scoundrel. It's kind of the opposite with her. You kind of get like a little class and a little ass and some treasure hunting. Vicky, are you still there?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you. Sorry about that. You might have cut out for a moment.
Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah, I was just saying, like, it's interesting, like, when you talk about sort of like how they kind of like fleshed out the character sort of outside of the actual sort of gaming thing, because, like, going back to sort of her conception as a character, like, the guy who created her, he was very much sort of at odds with like the marketing of the character. Like, he hated the whole like sexualized aspect of it. And he actually like left the project after the first game because he was sick of sort of the way that the media had kind of portrayed her as this like sex symbol. But I kind of feel like the the fact that she kind of isn't really like that in the games, but then in sort of the expanded universe, there's all of this kind of like sexualized content. It all kind of culminates into like this one thing, this kind of mysterious thing that I don't know. I don't know why he had a problem with it. I think it's very cool, but
I totally agree with you. I would think it made her a full person. It wasn't just on this real world sensibility and like life outside of it, because you're exactly right. She was not sexual in the game. I mean, she might be flirty with one of the villains, or one of her former love interests or whatever in the greater universe, but she never was like, she was not like some like hoe with a gun. She brought her knowledge, her skill, her everything. She kind of brought like a worldliness, but not like the worldliness of like 2024, where the girls are like doing high end escorting and like traveling the world. She's kind of worldly and older, maybe like the sun never sets, Churchillian sort of way, like 1930s, but very modern in some ways, very
yeah.
90s.
It's funny because I was listening to like Pool House's most recent podcast with Karen from Heaven from Twitter. They were talking about kind of like the idea of like a MILF, and like a MILF not necessarily being like somebody who has children. It's more of like a vibe. And I definitely get like massive like MILF vibes from like classic Lara. She was always like voiced by like sort of mature like voice actresses. We always kind of had the impression she was kind of in her 30s. She kind of had it together. And there was kind of like a sort of sophisticated sexiness about her that I really really appreciated. It's very British.
Yeah, very British, and it in a way it was very Kate Moss, because Kate Moss in the 90s, she was beautiful but not very sexy in some ways. Like there was something like not sexy about her, but she edgy, beautiful, very photogenic, and like had a strong presence. And I think that Laura was very similar. And I actually think that they modeled some aspects of Laura. Obviously, the chest is not very Kate Moss, but the her height is more Kate Moss size. It's 5'4", so she's a little bit
Yeah.
short. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's true or it's just like an urban legend, but I've heard like some of the producers talking about how the oversized like chest was kind of a bug that happened during production, and then they just liked it, so they kept it. But the entire first game, really, it sounds like from like the research that I've done on it, like the whole experience, it was just like six people in a room just sort of throwing shit together and seeing what stuck. And I think it kind of, for something to be created like that in a sort of chaotic fashion, to be so like complete and well-rounded and interesting, and like the level designs like incredibly complex. And I think to kind of just be sort of like riding on the seat of your pants and like coming up with stuff like that, I think is really creative and brilliant, really. Like video game production nowadays, like you've got teams of like hundreds of people producing these like empty open worlds with nothing to do and no character, and I just think like, I don't know, Return. But
No, you're totally right. I totally agree with you. I think that the 90s was kind of the gaming heyday in many ways, because just like you said, I mean, the whole world is filled with traps, very difficult puzzles. Like, honestly, I definitely used a guide sometimes, or there was this website called GameFAQ, FAQ, and yeah, I would totally look up cheats, not cheats, but like puzzle solving and tips and tricks, and just like there would always be jumps that I wouldn't be able to make. And I mean, it was like, it really was its own. Every temple, every location was so rich, and you just never knew. Like, I was always freaked out. I guess this was the wolf trauma, is that I was always freaked out by like the dinosaurs, and like whenever you're solving a puzzle, sometimes there'd be like raptors, and there's the giant T-Rex in the temple, which I mentioned to you in DM. And that, honestly, when I had to kill it, I did not pick up the stupid shotgun, so I only had twin pistols. So I creviced myself in like this kind of like glitch, I guess. So it's like the T-Rex couldn't reach in and grab you. If I
Yeah,
could just, it took
that's
me like
actually a very good technique. I've utilized that one myself quite a few times. So yeah, I don't know. That's definitely not the cowardly way. I think that's a viable tip. But
I
yeah, I don't know.
agree.
It's been interesting because the first three games, they've just been like remastered and released like last week on Lara's birthday, which happens to be Valentine's Day. Um, and it's been interesting sort of seeing the response from like new players who are kind of discovering them for the first time. And there's lots of people sort of commenting about like how clunky the controls are and how difficult it is to like move her. And um like I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about like that idea of like tank controls, because I really hate that phrase like tank controls, because it makes it sound like she moves like a tank, and she doesn't. I think there's like an incredible like level of like precision required to move her like with finesse and agility, but like it's definitely learnable. And I think if you watch like speed runners like busting through these levels, like they move with like such grace and elegance, like there's nothing tankish about it. I think players nowadays are just, they're so used to their characters being like magnetic, like you jump towards like a surface and you just stick to it and you don't have to press anything. And I don't know, I long for the days of like having to like keep my finger on the X pad and like pray that I don't like slip. But yeah, I don't know, it's been interesting sort of seeing like new players discover that control set and try and get to grips with it. But it's like second nature to me.
I think I totally agree with everything you're saying. I think that it's not a tank control game. I think she is takes finesse. I think that's kind of the whole point, and I think that's part of her kind of meta story. Like, is she is very athletic. But she can die. She's human. She's mortal, and she has to actually make the jumps. And when I remember playing when I was much younger, and I always felt like that's what made it human. That's what made the game human scale, was that it was always the possibility of falling off moving platforms. There was always the possibility of not being able to make like when you had to do the rope swings and then jump from one platform to the other, swinging on the rope and time it just perfect. So difficult, like very, very difficult. And also, I mean, I played it on a PS2, I think my first full playthrough. So did have the DualShock controllers. That did make it easier. And it definitely gave like a more multi-dimensional kind of movement, but it was still very difficult. And I think that you're totally right in characterizing like the modern video game mechanics as being very magnetic is a great word. I think responsive, like it's almost like there's no lag time, there's no delay. Everything is just seamless, smooth. And that's what I find about games now, is that I don't really find them that pleasurable. I think because
Yeah.
it just becomes like this, I don't know, it's like a dimension that is it's too it's not there's no texture to it. There's
Yeah.
no grasp. You can't grasp for any reality in it.
It's interesting, like, because there's a big divide, I think, within like the small Tomb Raider community that like exists online between sort of fans of like the classics and fans of like the reboot trilogy that started in 2013. And I don't think that the reboot games are bad games, but they're not Tomb Raider games, and I don't think that the studio who's making them like really understand what a Tomb Raider game is or like who Lara is. And I don't know, it's interesting when you compare the way that they control in particular, like, because when they rebooted her, they kind of like they decided that they wanted like a whole new story where she was like a 21-year-old and she's just graduated from uni. And this is like her sort of like first adventure. And the idea was to try and make the character more vulnerable and emotional. And it's interesting because the the gameplay of like the rebooted games, it removes all sort of danger. Like you can't really fall off a cliff. It's very difficult to fall off a cliff or like not make a jump because she has that sort of magnetic quality. And it just feels like the the vulnerability is all performative. It's all through like the cutscenes and stuff. But in the actual gameplay, she's almost completely invulnerable. Whereas with the classic games, like in cutscenes and everything, she was very competent and very confident, and all of the vulnerability came from you as the player because you're probably not good enough to be able to navigate the the levels. And I don't know. I think it's interesting that that's kind of become reversed. It's sort of like the vulnerability is now a performance. It's now sort of part of the story, but the actual gameplay, there's like no vulnerability at all. I don't know.
I think that was very well said. Why don't we, because you did mention like who that the current developers don't really understand who Lara, I'm gonna try and not be so colonial, but they don't really understand who she is. So Vicky, who is Lara in your opinion? Give a brief, like, give us like some lore.
She's an enigma. She's a mystery. She's like, um, she's very like cool and calm under pressure. She's confident. She's mature. She like shoots first and asks questions later. She doesn't really. I don't. She's. I never really viewed her as like a hero. She kind of has that like anti-hero thing going where, um, she's sort of, yeah, I don't know. She's an adventurer. She's cool. Like the new Lara is just boring and probably a lesbian. I don't know.
No, I mean that's the thing is that she wasn't really a hero. There was always this thing about her. She would always say these kind of like very British kind of like lines where she would kind of be like, "Yeah, I'm taking the thing. I'm taking the treasure from the tomb. I'm not." She wasn't necessarily stealing, but she kind of knew what was up. So she wasn't.
She's kind of a grave robber. Like she has the Ark of the Covenant like sitting in her mansion. It's like
Exactly.
she's not a good girl, but she's a fun girl.
Yeah, a fun girl. I think that's what makes her also very 90s, that she is like a fun girl, but she's not necessarily a bad girl either. And I think you're totally right in that the modern games, or the I guess the rebooted games, they're very much about survival, very much about, I don't know, like enemy. It's a lot more enemy battles. And I know there's several games in the original series that you had to, merc like many mercenaries and with a pickaxe and do different things. But
Yeah.
and that was hard in and of itself. But I think that the new games are much more about like a kind of third person shooter. It's kind of like, it's a completely different game. It's definitely not like the difficulty with the puzzles, difficulty with the jumping, exactly like what you said. There's a lot more gravity to the games, I find now. And there used to be something very even though they looked how they looked, and that this was the 90s, they had like that pixelated kind of quality, but it was easy to, I found it easy to suspend my disbelief in playing them and be like, I'm not Laura, but I'm in the game. I could just be very in the game, like in the mode.
Yeah, I think I don't know about you, but I've never really liked like first person games. I've always preferred playing like third person games, and there's something in particular I think about, especially like the old Tomb Raiders, where like she's quite small on screen, like the camera's kind of like zoomed out quite far, and I always describe it as like when I'm playing like a Tomb Raider game, I'm not Lara. You don't become Lara. You're just kind of like accompanying her. Like you're like her guide. Like you're making all the moves for her, but you're not her. And I think I don't know. There's something interesting about that, and I think that's one of the reasons why it worked so well having a woman, because there's kind of this like inbuilt desire as a man to want to protect her, and it hurts when she dies. She feels like she has like weight to her, and when you fall off a cliff and she like crumples up and it makes that horrible noise, it feels like significant.
I mean, every death in the game, in the original, especially in the original three, I think was very major, and there was not like save points everywhere. Like it was, sometimes it would be major losses, and especially for me, I'm not like really. I don't know. I was never like the smartest gamer, I guess I could say. Like I would play through, make it like hours without saving, and then you take an unfortunate tumble, and she does crumple. She literally
Yeah,
crumples into like absurd positions, like exactly almost like how a body would crumple. And so
yeah.
it always had like a seriousness.
That's another thing I think that's interesting about how games have changed. Like I find like all modern games, like when you die, they just turn into this like rag doll, and they're like flopping all over the place, and like I don't know, there was something about the very like immediate like crumple and then just stillness of like when you like fall off a cliff and die or get like impaled on some spikes or something, that like it's so much more impactful, I don't know, than this sort of like flailing around that you get in a lot of modern games.
No, I think that is very accurate. I think I remember falling on many a stalactite. Well, Laura did, but obviously I was playing her. So, yes, and being impaled, and I mean everything, drowning hundreds, probably hundreds of times, and not intentionally. I'm not like, I know some people would do that intentionally, but I mean it was your breath meter would run out. I mean, you could
Yeah.
not.
The only
Yeah,
the only the only intentional death that I always do is in Tomb Raider 1, and I think like level 5 or 6, when you're in the Palace of King Midas. Um, you can like jump on Midas's hand, and she like turns into gold, and then like sort of like falls on the floor as like a solid brick of gold. And I always do that every time because the animation is so cool. But that's the only time I would kill her intentionally.
it's totally okay. I mean, we all know that she comes back, and she'll be in her mansion, and we can go practice your jumping. That's what I would always do. If I lost like quite a few hours, I would just go practice in the mansion, kind of regroup, and maybe read a guide or two online, and try and figure it out, like where did I go wrong. And of course, that's the thing with the game, is that it was quite a master of time in some ways. Like the way they would lay it out, it would take, sometimes levels would take days. No, I'm not saying playing for days. I'm saying, but it would take days to play through them. And sometimes
Yeah,
it would be very smooth, and you could just like, everything was like you were hitting it, you were like in the mode, and then, you know. So I think that there was like it was a level of investment for sure into her, into the world. And I definitely agree with you that the camera angle made such a difference, and would make such a difference. And I do not play first person shooters. I don't. That's not my genre. I'm much more of like I like an action adventure, and I like a JRPG, and I am really good at fighting games, but I rarely play them because other people don't play with me because I always win. But No, I totally agree with you. I definitely like a third person. I think that it's more like it's more reading. There's something literary about it, like you are there as like a secret narrator or the secret, exactly like you said, like a guide, but like in a
Yeah.
spiritual way.
Yeah, I think like one of the other things about the sort of the new games that that I've never really like vibed with is they always try and introduce like companions or like friend characters for her, and like she doesn't need them. Like you're her friend, like you're her companion, and it's just you and her and the environment, and like there's something really beautiful about that. And when you introduce all of these sort of side characters that nobody really cares about, it sort of takes something away from that. And I don't know, she's no longer like alone anymore, and I don't know.
No,
That's an important aspect that I think is lacking.
I think that that was well said. I think exactly that. I think they don't need to make her the whole thing is to be alone in the temple. You're exploring it for the first time. You're there after thousands of years. You're going to defeat the evil god, and you know that's between you and Laura. That's not her extended social circle or her gunsmith or her electrician or all of the side characters that they added later on, especially on the ship. I think that's in the
Yeah,
third one.
yeah. I think like I do really enjoy the first like Angelina Jolie movie, but I think it has a lot of responsibility sort of on its shoulders for the way that the games have changed, because I feel like Crystal Dynamics, the studio that makes them now, they kind of looked at the movie and like I don't even think they played the old games. I think they watched the movie and they thought, okay, um, they have this like sort of absent father element. We need to like expand upon that. So like every game that they produced has some kind of like sort of story about her parents, which was never like a feature in the old games. Like I don't care about her parents. I there was like a sort of throwaway line in the instruction manual in the first game that said she was sort of like disowned by her parents because she just wanted to run off and go on adventures all the time, and like that was enough. That's all I need to know. I don't need any sort of daddy issues and sob stories about her mother. Like,
I agree with you. I am not a big Richard Croft fan myself. That's just not,
no.
or Amelia. I just thought that was agreed, totally unnecessary. I remember that. I remember exactly what you're talking about, like opening. I think I have on the Sega Saturn version. I opened it and it was like, yeah, she got disowned. She inherited the mansion from her aunt, her like weird wealthy aunt, and that was enough. That was exactly enough. That was who she was, and you were a Tomb Raider, and so was she, and the all the other stuff is, as Basil would say, kayfabe. So, so I agree with you. But I actually really loved the first film and I really disliked the second film. So I don't know
Yeah.
how you felt about it, but that's sort of my impression.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you on that. Like I've only seen the second film, I think maybe twice, and I wasn't super into it. I didn't like the way they tried to sort of have like a love interest character, because I don't think that that's necessary or like part of the. I I never really imagine her like engaging romantically with people. I think it's obvious that she knows that she's attractive and is willing to sort of use that to get what she wants. But I never, I always felt like she was way more interested in adventure than in sort of having sort of relations with men. I don't know. Not that
No, I
she's a
think
lesbian. I don't think that's true either. But yeah, I don't know. There's something cool about somebody who like um has just chosen a different path in life, and they've decided that adventure is the thing that they love and that's what they want to focus on. Like that's cool.
no, I agree with you. That is what made Laura cool, is that she may have had a sensual vibe, but she was not sexual. And I always appreciate that about her because you know what it's exactly like what you're saying, and I think it's because Angelina Jolie was so beautiful in the first one. Her top was so sheer, her boobs were so big, and her nipples were so hard at times. And I just think that the current developers probably did look at that and say, we need to make this, but like for the taste of like the Zoomers. And I don't really like, but even in the first film, it was more about location. I mean, the guy was a cinematographer, I think originally. I don't think he was I think he was a first-time director. And I think that it was about Laos and about Cambodia and about and Siberia and all the places they went, and it felt more like the games. Whereas the second one felt very action adventure, felt very cinematic, too much soundtrack for me. I like a soundtrack, but I like it to be punctuating. I don't like it to overwhelm. That's just my aesthetic,
Yeah.
but.
I didn't like the outfits in the second film either. I don't know, there's something about them. Like she wears a lot of like sort of cream colors and stuff, and it's a bit boring to me. I liked that very like kick-ass like black t-shirt and black shorts she wears in the first film. I thought that was awesome.
I agree.
I remember going to see the film when it first came out with my dad, and I must have been like I think like 11 or something. Um, and I remember being really, really upset that Angelina Jolie had blue eyes and not brown, and that was like my main takeaway from the movie. But like I rewatched it when I was a little bit more mature, and I thought it was awesome.
One thing I think was interesting. Well, okay, so let me ask you first. How did she do as for an accent?
I think she has a great accent. I thought she did really good. Um, Yeah, because it's not easy for Americans to do British well, but I thought her British accent was a lot better than Daniel Craig's American accent.
He did have kind of a stilted, like he had that accent that British people sometimes do when they do an American accent, and they sound correct, like their pronunciation, but then there's like a stiltedness, a kind of, it's not smooth. So
Yeah, it felt very unnecessary. Like I don't know why his character had to be American and why he couldn't just be British, um, but yeah, that's fine. I don't mind a little cheesy acting. It's fine. I was reading the other day that apparently, like, he hated making the movie. He couldn't stand it. He hated being on set. He didn't enjoy it at all. I'm just like, why? It looks so much fun.
I
But he seems
think,
like a bit of a grump.
yeah, he does, doesn't he? He has that very like old man sensibility, even when he was young, I think, or younger. I think that he definitely. I think he also wasn't the big star of that film, right? Like he was a known quantity, but he wasn't. She was really the star. It was like her
Yeah,
vehicle, and maybe sometimes maybe he got a little jelly. Who knows?
perhaps, perhaps.
But no, I agree with you, and I agree with you. I think the colors and the outfit, I think that seems secondary, but it's so primary to who she is, and I think that it's so her original outfit of the shorts, or I can't remember. Yeah, I think she wore shorts, and the blue tank top was so iconic, and like kind of the pistol suspenders and all the elements of it. It was so iconic. So to see her in like sort of a cinematic universe version, I think is very interesting, and I think that that is what made part of the first film like interesting and more textual, giving it more of a relationship with the games. And then
Yeah,
this,
for sure.
you're totally right. I think it's too much. I don't really know what they were trying to do. It didn't feel like the same. They just should have made like a. I mean, yes, the story obviously, and then the getting the Pandora's box and all that. There was elements of it where it was very Tomb Raider, but I don't know. It didn't really work for me.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I found quite interesting about like the old games is kind of because the story I think has always been kind of secondary. They don't have the most like in-depth stories. The stories are kind of a way to get you from point A to point B. But I think it's interesting the kind of the mythological elements that they incorporated. Because there's such a like hodgepodge of like different like mythologies. I know in the first game, during like one of the Greece levels, you have to go into these like 4 different rooms and solve these different puzzles. And they've mixed up like Norse gods and like Greek gods and Roman gods. They have like it's supposed to be set in Greece. But there's a room dedicated to Neptune instead of Poseidon. There's like a room dedicated to Thor, who has nothing to do with Greek mythology. And I liked the idea that it was just these like 4 or 5 blokes in a room sort of trying to like pin together a mythological narrative from all of these different pieces that they found all over the place. There's something quite charming about that. But then in the second game, which is like largely set in China, there's like I don't know how much you know about it, but the main narrative of the second game is that she's trying to find this dagger, that if you stab yourself with it, you like turn into a dragon. And one of the keys that you have to find, these objects that you have to find to sort of try and locate the key to the location of this dagger, is like this like statue of a biblical angel, which you like find in the middle of Tibet or somewhere. And I was like, what is it's such a hodgepodge. It's hilarious, but I love that about it.
I totally agree with you. I do remember that game, honestly, but I don't remember it. I probably remember the Venice sort of like plotline, like elements better, but I do remember vaguely the dragon, bear, and all the dagger stuff. Yes, I do remember it, but maybe not well. So I love that too. I think that's great that you brought it up. I'm a big like lore nerd, like not necessarily the lore of the game, but maybe like the mythology. I'm a big mythology person. I'm sure you kind of figured that. And so I think, yes, I think that is charming. I think it's very charming. I don't have a problem with it. I actually think it works. And I think it also works in context to the film as well, in the first film, having it be like a secret society that has existed for thousands of years. Because in my mind, that's what I always thought too. And maybe it's because the movie becomes sort of melded with the games in a way in your memory. So I can always, maybe I reappraise the first and second and third game in context to the movie, but that's how I always saw it. Was like she was not just rescuing, or not just in a Mayan temple, not just in, an Incan temple or a Chinese temple or a Tibetan temple. It was always some other layer of society that she was penetrating that we didn't really know about. It was kind of a hidden history. Very Graham Hancock, if Graham Hancock was like a cool British woman instead of like a kind of stodgy ex-BBC weirdo. So I don't know. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's kind of how I always found it. Like there was always like a narrative that wasn't told, but you could sort of make one, like a throughway.
Yeah, I also think like the very notion that there's like all of these sort of different objects and things that she collects from all of these different sort of mythologies and cultures, but they all have some kind of like sort of supernatural purpose, and it kind of feeds into this idea that like I don't know, because I think in some media like they'll sort of focus on like one mythology, and that one mythology is true in the universe of that media. But I feel like in Tomb Raider, like all of these different mythologies are true, and all of these different objects have like real supernatural sort of properties and qualities. And I don't know, there's something very cool about like all of the world's like different mythologies like all existing at the same time and all being true. I don't know, I really like that.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, I don't want to call her a perennialist or like say that Laura would be an Evola poster if she still existed or exists in the real world. But I definitely think that there was that element. And I think that that is very cool. And I think, I think games are made more now for this kind of like immersive autism, and they don't leave much room for like the nuance that yes, this cosmology might be true, but then does that exclude other like ways of thinking, other kinds of cosmologies, other kinds of like magic? And yes, I think that is the strength of the series for sure, is that it all can coexist And yes, she might fight this god in this temple, but it doesn't mean that she's, taking down all of heaven. She's just fighting an evil god. Then she moves on to, this demon or this Jin or this whatever. It's all she's always doing. It's time doesn't really exist for her in the way, obviously, because there are dinosaurs and there are evil gods and all that. But I just think that time is suspended for her, and especially inside of the temples. It's kind of
Yeah,
like a space relations that's very different than gaming today.
yeah, definitely. I would agree. What sort of things do you like to play now? Do you play a lot of games still now, or is this something that you kind of did when you were younger that you've kind of grown away from?
So I definitely haven't grown away from JRPGs. I still find myself very drawn to good ones.
Hmm.
Uh, I was always a big Final Fantasy, like the entire series. The first one I ever played, everyone thinks it's seven, but really the first one I ever played was four. But um, I love that series. I think it's amazing. I think that you actually mentioned this, and I'm not saying it because you mentioned it, but I actually like Final Fantasy VIII the best with
Yes,
Squall.
it's my favorite. Yeah, I don't hate seven or anything, but like I
No,
always just liked eight a lot more. It was the first one that I played when it came out, and there's something about like the school setting that I really like the kind of the idea of these like sort of like student soldiers. There's something. It's very anime, the vibe of the sort of storyline and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It always resonated with me more. Like a lot of the criticism of eight is that people don't really like Squall as like a protagonist, and I just thought he was the coolest guy ever.
I liked him. I thought, yeah, maybe a little moody, but like that was very much of the time. I mean, that was
Yeah,
life.
that's what you like.
It was like very cruel intentions. Like he was kind of a bad boy, but like he wasn't really. He actually wasn't. He was kind of a misunderstood character who just had a lot of like feelings. He was kind of emo before that was really a thing. So
Yeah,
I liked that game a lot. I love the summons in that. I think that's what made it for me. I didn't love the draw system. I will. That's just my honest appraisal. It's not wasn't
yeah,
my favorite. But I did spend like probably days doing draw spells from monsters all over to like get up to 99 for every character. So, I mean, I definitely and then replaying to get like the carbuncle summon and when you'd forget and then that's what made those games so fun is that you could kind of re you could kind of redo levels. I always liked that. I thought that was very clever in a way because you would miss things and you would miss Easter eggs. Um, yeah, so I love that one. I actually also love nine. I know people did not like nine at all.
yeah. I like nine a lot too. Yeah, I think if if they were gonna do like a remake of one like now, I would say like nine would be like my like top choice. Um, because I just think the like art style and stuff is so beautiful. I think it would be like magical to be able to see it sort of like reimagined. Um,
I fully agree. I was a big Valkyrie profile. I love that game. And there's so many good like I do love appreciate. I think that you and I share this is that I appreciate a beautiful game as well. I appreciate like the
yeah,
hand rendered details. I love like a hand drawn background, even with like 3D characters. I still love a hand drawn background. I love like anime touches. Like give me more anime. Give me more Japan. I love that
yeah,
personally. Yeah, and I think that's what made Final Fantasy VIII very strong, in my opinion. And I love that you could like that you got to play as one of the teachers, and she was like a 15-year-old instructor. I mean that was cool. That shit was
yeah.
cool.
She was very hot as well. Like I don't know, I like Renoa, but yeah, I would if I was Squall, I'd definitely be hot for Teach.
I mean, and that was the interesting thing. And I think the other, I liked the kind of like the sorceress element. Like she was. I mean, there was multiple sorceresses, but I think that was very interesting. I think they made like really built a full world for that game, and I think they did that with nine as well. And I think It was very charming. I like 7. I do like 7. I think 7 was a very fun game. I like a lot of there's a lot of elements I liked, but honestly, that game got very repetitive sometimes. And you were
Yeah.
running around and just grinding, and you could never really switch off the, enemy function where you'd like any time you take like 3 steps and it would be just, you know, endless enemies. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think. Tomb Raider always reminds me of Resident Evil. I don't know if this is true for you. That was always true for me. I always associate them together.
Yeah, I definitely I would even go so far as to say that like Tomb Raider is a survival horror game in a lot of ways. Um like it's I mean nowadays I guess because the graphics and stuff are kind of like outdated, like a lot of the kind of fear element has kind of gone, but the the enemies just like jump out at you from nowhere. There are so many like jump scares and so many like just creepy things. Like the first game, like the last sort of like 2 or 3 levels, you're just in this sort of like weird sort of meat palace. It looks like the Lady Gaga meat dress, but like in a building. And the sort of floors are like pulsating with blood. Like there's definitely a lot of survival horror elements in Tomb Raider, and I was a huge like Resident Evil 2 fan. Like that was one of those games where like my older brother would always play it, and I would always just sit and watch him sort of from behind a cushion, because I was too scared to play it myself. But I loved like watching him play it. It was so fun.
I think, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think Tomb Raider had a lot of survival horror elements, and I think in a maybe ironic way, that's why the newer games are less interesting because they take the survival horror to mean you must defeat the enemies. And I think that what made the earlier Tomb Raider games and the earlier Resident Evil games really interesting was they weren't really shooting games per se. It was a
Yeah.
lot more about surviving, puzzle solving, collecting, and like the collectible thing. I also wanted to mention that is I loved those little cut scenes where she would like get some item and be like, "Oh, this is like the fill inlaid mask with jade and obsidian, and came from this." Just be like a little blurb, but you get little voice acting, and
Yeah.
then it made it very charming and it made it like a full world. And you just knew that she was going to put it somewhere in her house. And then eventually they did, I think, have that element where she would put her collectibles in her like little museum part of her house. So, and I think the Resident Evil thing that was also a big thing of that game was collectibles, getting all the herbs to make health potions, ammo. You had to conserve so much ammo, like it was just impossible to find. It was like every bullet mattered, and that is so
Yeah.
rare.
And like even like the puzzles in like the early like Resident Evil games, it's like who's putting these puzzles in the middle of a police station, like and why? But like they make no sense sort of narratively, but they're like so much fun, and that there's definitely a kind of like Tomb Raidery element to that sort of aspect of the game. But yeah, no, definitely, I love the Resident Evil games. That's one of the few series where like I don't like the first person one. I couldn't really play like 7, and I haven't played like the Village one. But like I do sort of try and play like the newer Resident Evil games, and I do still enjoy them. I think Capcom is one of the few studios that still seems like it has its head screwed on.
I think they just have a legacy, and I think they try and uphold it. I personally like Resident Evil 4, where Leon is in a village. I think that was the first one I cleared. Like I fully cleared. It wasn't just like a game I played and then like maybe played a million times but gave up. I cleared it in probably like a couple goes. So I think, yeah, that one will always hold a specific charm for me. And but definitely not the hardest of all the like the first two were much more difficult and
Yeah.
definitely more concerned with ammo. That was definitely much more of a shooting game. But the enemies were very scary, like the Plagas, and then you had to like they would like be charging you with like their full like meat face or whatever plant meat. I don't
Oh
know.
yeah, for sure.
That it was scary. It really was scary. Not the kind of game. I mean, well, if you're a vampire boy, you definitely play in the middle of the night with no lights on, But I'm just saying, for most people, that's probably not the way to play. But I always enjoyed doing that. I love the horror element personally, and yeah, I really love those games too.
Yeah, me
So,
too.
what other games that do you want to? If you have any other games you want to shout out or say the vibe that is similar or kind of, you know.
Trying to think. I mentioned the other day on the timeline. Have you ever played like Kudalka?
Okay, so I did not. I did look up that game because I was like, "What is this game that I've never heard of?"
Oh,
But
I
it
think
was
you'd really like it. Like it's not perfect. Like the gameplay is a little bit janky, but like the story is like very cool. It's about this like sort of gypsy girl and this like priest and this like adventurer guy, and they're kind of um it's set in like this sort of like gothic sort of village in like Victorian times. I think it's Victorian times, um but yeah, the vibe is very cool. I remember I bought it like on PlayStation when I was a kid just because I really liked the cover because it was just like a close up of her face. Um it's just had the like I don't know. Something about like the way sort of Japanese game studios do like westernized faces that's just like very beautiful, especially in the 90s.
I agree.
But yeah, it's definitely one worth checking out.
Okay, great. Well, I will definitely be checking that game out, and I will just say that I agree with you. I love that. I think the anime aesthetic, like the '90s anime aesthetic, maybe not so much like the lolicon stuff now, but I think it's very. I love it. I think that that is a really. They did Western faces very interestingly, very cool. Um, it also reminded me of the Silent Hill series. I don't know if you ever played through those.
Yeah, I do like Silent Hill. It's almost a meme to like Silent Hill at this point, but
Right.
like
True.
but I think they're popular for a reason. That franchise is kind of in a mess, I think, at the minute. I don't really know what's gonna happen there, but we'll see. I
Well,
do find I don't know if you've been keeping up with because obviously they're remaking Silent Hill 2. There's been like a huge amount of backlash about the latest trailer that they released for it because it shows a lot of combat, and a lot of people are sort of saying like, oh, like why are they focusing on combat in a Silent Hill trailer? And I'm just like, did you play like Silent Hill 2? There's loads of combat in Silent Hill 2. Like, I don't know. That's not something that I'm particularly concerned about. I worry that they won't be able to sort of recapture the same tone as the original game. But yeah, I think people sort of whining about it having too much combat clearly didn't sit down and play the original because there was plenty.
plenty of combat, I agree. And like very scary, very atmospheric game, great soundtrack. Um, I think that those games are very difficult to recapture the vibe, like you're saying, because it was like that was cutting edge gaming. There was cutting edge graphics at the time. I mean, to have like the smooth text kind of in the dialogues and it just all worked. It's just there was something about it. It was a vibe. So I totally agree with you. Do you have any predictions on upcoming games that you are excited about or think that they will do a good job on, which is obviously more rare now? But yeah.
Mm, not really sure. Like I don't feel very optimistic about gaming in general. I'm quite excited about Dragon's Dogma 2. I've been kind of following that a little bit because I liked the first one. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think outside of like Nintendo and like a few studios, I feel like a lot of like game studios just don't really know what they're doing anymore, especially Western studios. Um, so yeah, that's gaming feels kind of like it's dying at the minute, and I hope that's not true, and I'm sure it isn't, and I'm probably being over dramatic, but definitely feels like it.
You know what, I actually share like this opinion, and this might be pessimistic as well, but I don't think necessarily it's dying per se. I think it's definitely taken on this form that is unsustainable. I think that the focus on blockbuster properties instead of like actually good gaming, good mechanics, good gameplay, and like we said, you don't even need a great story. You can just, throw a beautiful British girl into a temple and just like make us
Yeah.
figure out what to do. You don't, it doesn't have to be all everything. You don't have to.
If I had like one piece of advice for anyone who's listening who does like Tomb Raider specifically, I would say buy these remasters and do not buy the next game, because the studio who makes them now, Crystal Dynamics, they hate classic Lara. They can't stand her, and they definitely have an idea of like the direction that they want to take the character in, and I think the studio recently got bought out by Embracer Group, which is like a big sort of conglomerate company, and they have a history of disbanding studios that like release unsuccessful games. I don't know. Are you familiar with like the Saints Row franchise?
Just like mildly from like
Yeah, so that I played the old ones like a little bit, but it's not really my type of game. But I know that they were also owned by like Embracer Group, and they released like a sort of rebooted Saints Row game last year or the year before, and it bombed horrendously because they'd made it very sort of Gen Z, like social justice warrior sort of focused. And the Embracer Group just disbanded that studio entirely and took the franchise off them. So I feel like if the next Tomb Raider game, if nobody buys it, like they'll give the franchise to a company that knows what to do with it. I hope. That's my hope for the future of Tomb Raider and Lara. But
I want Laura to live on too. I want her to like be successful in raiding the other hidden temples of the world, and accumulating all her treasure and the treasures for the world, obviously. I agree with you, and I do think there is hope in gaming, because I think there are people like us who really love not necessarily classic era games, but definitely like that. There is a classicism in the 90s, early 2000s era gaming. Like there really is. It was very pivotal in, at least in the moment. So I think there is hope in that things can live on in people's memories, and hopefully this new generation of developers will like get it together and not, I don't know, Gen Z is not going to play the same games that I want to play. That's just, that just seems to be the truth. So,
yeah,
for us, and I think everything would be a lot better. But I will say we're hitting an hour now. I will say thank you so much, Vicky. You were an amazing guest. I knew you would be.
thank you.
And
No,
so do you want to plug your Twitter or anything, any projects, any things that you're doing, whatever, or just Twitter, that's fine too. But
yeah, I don't really have any projects in the work at the minute. But you can follow me on Twitter if you like at redacted vampire. And yeah, it's been really fun. It's nice to talk to you. I knew it would be, but yeah, that's cool.
well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and honestly, you really were a great guest, and I wasn't sure exactly what we would cover, but I'm very happy thus far, and so thank you so much. And honestly, if you ever want to come back, you just let me know, and we'll talk video games or Vampire City or whatever you want to talk about. Okay? So
Thank you. You're a sweetie.
thank you very much, and have a good one. Okay?
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, this is Jin the Ninja, and if you enjoyed the show, you can check out more episodes on Spotify and Anchor, and you can check me out on Twitter at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn, and on Instagram at Threshold Saints. And there's a link tree in the show notes, so you can check out all my appearances and my shows to date.